Nice to meet you.
And you, yes, nice to meet you. Cast your mind back, not too long ago. How did you play when you were younger? Where did you play? What did you play?
Now we're talking in the 1960s, 70s now. So it's a long, long time ago. And I didn't have a television. So you used to sort of make your own play and entertainment. And we did it with other kids. We played out in the street all the time. We played football in the street. We didn't have as many cars as you have now, or traffic problems. And we used to play in the street with the kids. We had a little gang going, and we'd make dens. And we'd have rows with the other gang up the road, around the block. And we'd all look after each other, and we'd have a little pecking order in our little gang. It was very much, we used to make our own fun, and it used to be sort of a bit old-fashioned fun. We'd climb a tree, we'd make a den in a tree, we'd find some old wood and try and strap it to a tree and try not to fall out of a tree house that was a bit wobbly. And my parents had the bigger garden out of everyone's, so it was basically where we played football, went for walks, went down, we lived near the canals, we went along the canal and we'd throw stones in the canal and float stuff around. And so we made our own fun, but we were very much a little gang in our street, and that's how we played. And we're still friends now. We still see each other now and say hello.
So thinking of those places around where you lived and where you would go off and build a den, that sort of thing, were there adults around?
No, because our gangs were usually, there was a range of ages. And there would always be like the head gang person, and they'd be the older boy, but they would look after you. So you were looked after. And of course your parents knew all these different children, and they knew their parents. So there was a sort of a sense that you were being looked after because you were a group that looked after each other. And you knew that, the elder ones would be more sensible than the younger ones. So, and then the girls would look after the younger ones, and then the lads would look after the girls. And there was this sort of camaraderie within the group that we looked after each other. And we kept an eye on each other. And if anything was going wrong, one was fast at running, so they'd run to a parent. And I don't know, we just sort of had this system going. I don't know whether it's because I'm talking about the 60s and 70s, and we didn't have PlayStations, but I think we socialised more. We had, not sort of a pecking order, that's quite an old-fashioned word to use, but everyone sort of had something to offer the gang. And that was their place, but they would look after each other. So no, there was never parents around, but we were never so far away from them. But no, we were very much sort of left to go off.
Do you think that children still have the opportunity to do that now?
I think it's a shame that children don't have the opportunity. I suspect the risks are probably just the same. We do have a lot more cars on the road and vehicles on the road, and a lot faster these vehicles can go. So there is cars. We had a lot more countryside, I think, in my upbringing. We were only a stone's throw from a field or a tree. I think a lot of children now are living in quite built up areas, and I don't think there's enough green space for them to play. And I quite like the idea of natural green space, not manufactured green space. So children can go and dig up worms, or I was going to say collect frog spawn. I don't know whether you can do that anymore, but you can go and explore nature in the raw and not have it manufactured or thrown at you. I probably think risks, the level of risk is about the same. It may be different, but the level of risk is the same. I don't know whether it's because our parents were coming from a different generation as well, that they perhaps gave us more flexibility. I was far more cautious with my child. When I was bringing up my child as a single mom, I was always very conscious of where he was. And I was always, if he went to play with another child or another group of children, I would pass on responsibility to that parent. So I don't know. I think I was more strict with my child bringing him up, which I think's a shame, really. And I was always very wary of where he was if we were on the sand dunes at Blackrock Sands. Because, of course, I took my son there because I went there and it was so great. I would always be looking for where he was. I think risks are probably the same. They're different. Are we a little bit more risk averse? Possibly. That's a shame, really. but I do like the idea of children being able to go off and play in gangs and learn, like the famous five, and go off on adventures.
You said you were more cautious with your son. Why do you think that is? Or why do you think, modern generations of parents are more cautious? Where does that come from?
I think it's because we see more in the media. I think the media's probably got a lot to do with it. We watch the news now. When I was growing up, as I said, we didn't have a television. Now we do have a television. Now we do have social media. Now we do have WhatsApps and alerts and all sorts. And what comes often through the media is quite negative. Or it's a bad news story, or it's someone that's done something bad. And I think we always hear that, and it's reinforcing that it's bad.
So imagine your childhood scene of you playing. What do you think would have changed if an adult was suddenly around?
The whole dynamics of the group would have changed, because I'm going on about the group and everyone having a role, responsibility, a nickname, a pecking order. That would have all changed. I don't think you could have been free to explore your play or where you were within that social group, because you'd have been guarded about what to say, what not to say, whether you overstep the boundaries, what interpretation the adult would have on your play. I think it would have completely changed the dynamics of that play and that learning from that play and the level of risk we took, because I'm sure my parents would have gone, oh, no, that tree looks a bit rotten, don't climb that tree. Or what are you doing with those nails and that hammer? Where have you got those from the garage? No, go and put them back. And I was like, no, I want to build a tree house with this piece of wood. No, you're not doing that. What are you doing with that rope? Oh, no, you could hurt yourself with that rope. And I think the experiential learning by your mistakes is a lot easier when you haven't got a parent almost judging you or putting the boundaries on you. Play's got to be free within limitations. Play's got to be free for children to make mistakes and to learn and to say things that are wrong and to gauge how the others treat them and then learn from that for next time. And if you've got a parent interjecting on that, then they're going to be told how to grow up, not learn how to grow up. I think if you're told what to do, when to do it, how to say it, how to think, that doesn't make for whole people growing up, because we've got to be different. That's life's rich tapestry. We've got to be able to explore, have different points of view. That's how our society works. So we've got to have scope for individualism, and children have got to be confident in their own bodies, in their own skin, with their own thoughts and feelings, because these are the grown-ups, the people of the future. So they've got to have that freedom to explore in the early years.
How do we make sure that children are, even through coronavirus, playing out together? Children more than ever now, through listening to adults or seeing things on the news, are aware of their mortality, aware of the situation that we're in, and they're perhaps not having the same opportunity to go out just with their friends and play out these experiences, talk to each other about these experiences, or just have the headspace to think about it.
To pass that message on to children, but particularly to parents, I would say, to say, actually, you're not going to break the law if your kids go and play on the field with the football. These are the regulations, and by doing that, you're not going to break any laws. Fresh air, this is what we need. I think also a reassurance that for some children, most children, if they get the virus, aren't going to be poorly. But obviously, parents there, it's about the level of risk that parents are willing to take. So, for example, my son's got asthma. I would be more worried about him mixing with other children than if my son didn't have asthma. So you've got to sort of, in some respects, let the parents know. I don't say educate them, because that's quite a harsh word, but let them know the value more now than ever of children mixing. Because if this is going to go on for a long while, if we don't get a vaccine soon, then the ramifications of not playing, not meeting friends, not getting fresh air, not running around, and doing the exercise might be worse than the risk of a child getting COVID but not having symptoms. But it's an absolute individual choice within families, really, because that's a difficult one. And where people pitch that level of risk is an individual choice and responsibility. But the other thing as well is if you've got a lot of people living in your home, if you've got a multi-generational home, you know, you're going to take less risk because you've got granny and granddad than you are if you've got very, you know, younger parents and young siblings. So it's an individual choice, but I think to make that choice, people need to be aware of actually what is the situation and not just listen to what the media is saying.
Well, the person who posed that sort of statement question, Penny, also said that weighing the outcomes of play is a bit like weighing a rainbow. You can't, and it's all about the legacy of allowing children to play now. It's the future legacy that you can't measure at this point in time. That's what is important. Somebody else asked how, in this time where inequalities are boldened, inequalities are made bigger through adversity, such as a pandemic, how do we ensure that those children most affected by coronavirus still have access to the right to play?
I think about the Myler Hospital and use that as an example, because I think as well, professional play workers and professionals, social workers, children's social workers, CAMS teams, they have a big responsibility here. They need to step up and say and identify that there is a problem, because, you know, all services have been scaled back. It's very difficult. We can't get access to a lot of people readily as we did because they're working from home, they're working virtually. If we don't start addressing some of the issues around play and the ability to play and what that delivers to a child now, for when in a year's time. Education's a good one, for example. So, you know, if schools don't go back and don't find some way of going back in a COVID safe way that parents and teachers are going to accept the risk, then the effects on these children now it will carry them for the rest of their lives. And it's the same with play. And I think professionals have a responsibility now to look at the situation and start saying, I'm a children's nurse and I've got children here, and, you know, we've sectioned off the play area because of cross-infection. Actually, we can't keep going on like that. So let's put some system in place whereby we can, and there are always ways of working around it, that, you know, this bay with these 4 children in can go and play together as a bubble or a pod, or whatever you want to call it. They will play, then we'll get someone in to clean all that, then we'll get the next bay in, and we'll do it that way. I think you need to be really positive about what we can do and make it happen, because we need to start giving children the opportunities that they had before, because this has gone on now, what, half a year, 7 months, 8 months. It's likely to go on for probably a year, and children can't afford to have their lives on hold, that learning, that experience for a year. So I think as adults, we need to start now looking at how to deliver, and how to deliver in a different way, rather than retreating back and saying we can't deliver because of COVID. We're going to have to deliver despite COVID. And I think we have a role to play there. And the other thing as well is about diversity, is because we've all retreated back into silos a bit, and we're all starting to now poke our heads out of the silo to think, well, what's next? A lot of children, particularly with disabilities, have been stuck at home, have not had the opportunities. The parents need support, they need to integrate, and the value of children with disabilities living with, working with, learning with, playing with children who haven't got disabilities, working together is so important, because that's breaking down those future barriers and those future prejudices and those future discriminations. And, you know, not having them mixing for so long is not going to make for good adults in the future. I was a community councillor at Gresford, and one of the things I did, I remember going round speaking to mums saying, what would you like in this park? You know, what's your problem with this park, as a community councillor? And the mum said, I've got 2 lads here, and we come down to the park and we picnic with all the friends, and the friends are running around the park, and my 2 lads are sat here in their wheelchair watching them. So I actually petitioned and got an all ability roundabout. So we changed one of the roundabouts in Gresford Park and put an all ability roundabout in. So these 2 lads could go on and play on this roundabout with their friends. And it's a bit about doing that sort of thing in whatever way you can, finding out how we can go about so children can play together regardless of their ability.
And funnily enough, again, coincidentally, you've sort of touched on the answer to what Adele, who asked that question, said, which was, she said, you know, it should be around designing these things in the first place, around inclusion, rather than having to retrospectively, like you did there with that park area, and do it retrospectively at probably increased cost than it would have done to do so in the first place.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about education and sort of, you know, putting lack of access to play and education on par there. And one of our other trustees, Jackie, mentioned about this concept that's been talked a lot about, children catching up with their education. And what she said there was about play being the brain's favourite way of learning. So a more non-didactic approach to learning, and in a way that's freely chosen, which is more in line with the sort of playwork principles that we work within. What are your thoughts about that, about having a more playwork approach to education, particularly in the context of catching up, if that's even possible?
Well, we all know that you learn more by play. You know, if you're enjoying yourself and you've got scope to make mistakes without being ridiculed or feeling intimidated, it makes for, you learn quicker, that learning is reinforced, and you know, that is the way for me that children should be learning, and they should be happy, and they should be stimulated, and they should be learning, and it should be free, and it should be quite easy to learn if they're happy and that environment is facilitated. I think that's an excellent way for catching up. I've been talking to a couple of schools this week, and there are some serious concerns from teachers and educational providers about what some children have missed. So some children have said, well, you know, we haven't got a laptop, but my dad managed to managed to get hold of one for me, and we have a system with my siblings, and you know, he's got this free app that was, but there was a lot about dad there, and it was a lot about dad doing that, and the teachers were saying to me, actually not everyone's got a great dad like that. And they're the ones that they're really concerned about falling behind educationally, because they haven't got that level of push behind them from home. So anything that, particularly in those circumstances, that can help children catch up, and if they can catch up more readily because they're enjoying it and it's part of play, and they will attend, and their parents will encourage them to attend, because it's not seen as chalk and talk, it's seen as playing with your mates in the park, then great. That's got to be the way forward, because there's going to be a big challenge about how particularly some children in our society are going to catch up with their education, and if it can be fun and not dressed up as education, then that might help. So absolutely, that's a good way forward. It's a difficult one, because our whole education system is based on attainment of grades, and schools are marked on grades, teachers are marked on grades, children are marked on grades. Everything's grades led through a very traditional academic way. So you're going to sit your exams and you're going to go to university. Well, I never went to university. Well, I did, but not you know, straight from school. And I left school at 16. And I wasn't, you know, I would prefer to go off and build a dam in a river than I would be to do double maths. And I think the natural progression of what I'm saying now is that I've become a member of Parliament. and I hated double maths. I was no good at maths, but you know, I love to go fishing or build dams or build a raft. So I think some of it is actually, it's the way our society places merit on exam passes and not necessarily on the round of the whole person. But when I used to go away with my son, usually in a caravan somewhere, we used to do a little report. So he was a bright spark, so he was really quite keyed up to doing formal education. That was good for him. It wasn't rubbish for me. I wasn't that way inclined, but he was very good with his STEM subjects, his maths, his science, and he used to love that structure. Whereas I used to love something different. So when we used to go away, I used to make him do little reports and projects, and he used to stick bits in and leaves and stuff into a book and take it into school. And you know, the value he got from that, personally, I think was just as valuable as his double maths or his advanced physics or whatever. And I think it makes for a whole person. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do exams, because that's a structure that's in place. That's a society we live in, but it needs to be balanced out. And perhaps the weighting needs to change a little bit, because we want good, all-round, resilient, resourceful, happy adults. You know, not academic prodigies. But equally, we've got to acknowledge that we are in a society where, you know, exams equal university equals jobs. That might change over time. I don't know, but we need the balance of the two. That's my feeling. I don't know whether I've answered that question right.
We've talked about education. We've talked about children having access and permission and the right and time and space to play. Linking that into UK Parliament Week and your role as a member of UK Parliament, and then thinking more broadly about the role of Parliament and government, how does that link in? So how do you, as an MP, take your understanding of all those things and then influence government?
Play and education in Wales is the remit of the Welsh Government in Cardiff. So they will give you the funding, they will give you the structure, they give you the academic attainments, what I was talking about before about, you know, passing exams. They set all that remit. So in some respects, I can't necessarily, apart from lobbying, influence that. I can always lobby, but I don't have as much influence there. But what I can do is look at play. And we have all party parliamentary groups around play, experiential learning, the purposes of play and education. And I can feed into those groups what our conversation is and my feelings on it. And I'm going to ask you now if you want me to feed anything from your point of view into that. And I can certainly look at the overarching policy and theories on play and how play should be impacted in our society and what our priorities should be for children going forward. That would be a UK-wide thing, and I can certainly do that. But as far as funding for play groups, for play events, education, how it links the hospitals, you know, I haven't got as much influence. I've got a little bit, but not as much.
In terms of context of the Playwork Foundation, I'm based in Wales, and I'm always the first person to shout out about how fantastic some of the progress that's been made in Wales in terms of legislating for children's play. We've got the play sufficiency duty here in Wales. We were the first country in the world to legislate for play. And like you say, that responsibility is with the Welsh Government in Cardiff Bay. But the Playwork Foundation works across the UK, and a lot of my colleagues and a lot of the focus of the foundation is on what's happening in England, because there's quite a deficit there at the moment. So, for example, we produced, in partnership with Play England, the play board in England, and the International Play Association, a manifesto for play. So that was obviously geared towards the last general election. But it's certainly it was a big piece of work that we'd like to continue to work with politicians on. So I'll send that over to you too.
Yeah, great.
But Anita Grant, who is the current chairperson of Play England, recently at an event she said that they can't find the door they can't find that way of starting a dialogue with government in the UK. So again, if that's something that you'd be able to take forward, whether it be to the all-party parliamentary group or to the UK government, that would be absolutely fantastic in terms of continuing that conversation about play work. That would be brilliant.
Absolutely, because I'm a big advocate. I really see the value of play for children. It's massive, massive. I am a social worker by trade, and I remember doing Piaget's theory of play. So yeah, I do know the value of play. So I'm more than happy. I just need you to tell me, what you feel, because you're the professional on play, and I'm here to advocate for you and the kids you support. So you tell me what you'd like me to do, and I'm more than happy to do it.
You mentioned working together, so professionals, members of parliament, Senedd members, people within society working together for children to play. So I suppose I'll just repeat the question. What role do you, as an MP, and what role as an institution of the UK Parliament, do you have to play in that?
My role as an MP is to support all the children in Wrexham and their right to play and their right to learn from play, particularly in these difficult times. And my role is to also support the play workers and the teachers and the professionals who are supporting the children of Wrexham, enabling them to do that. And then on a broader note, to lobby to make sure that the conditions are right for the play workers to work and for the children to play. And my role is to really try and facilitate that as best I can, and to come and play with you all when I can. I'm dying to get on that ship.
Thank you so much for taking, a substantial chunk of time out of your day to explore some of those ideas and to answer the questions.
You're welcome.
It's been really beneficial.
All right, take care.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Ta-ra, bye-bye.
Well.